In this video, I want to introduce you to the clone stamp tool and the healing brush and how they work and what their uses are. If you're familiar with Lightroom or editing in Adobe Camera Raw, some of these tools are redundant, but it definitely helps to use them in Photoshop or know how to use them in Photoshop just in case you missed something while you were editing your original raw image. You can do it in Photoshop without having to go all the way back to the beginning. So the first thing I want to do, and we have this face to work on, is use the healing brush. And so the healing brush, the way it works, zoom in here, the way the healing brush works is that it blends from one area to another. It will allow us to preserve a lot of the texture from the area that we're trying to cover up. So what I want to do is zoom in here. So I'm going to use this navigator over here so we can just zoom in. I'm also going to use my other little handy shortcuts. Remember the space bar gives you the pan tool, allows you to move around the image. And so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. Now, the only thing I want to do, I mean, her face or skin is very clear, most of it. So what I want to do is just go in and clean up just some little blemishes that may be distracting. And it doesn't have to be just on skin. It can be anything. If you have dust on your sensor, you definitely need to clean that up. Any of these little wispy hairs right here, we can go ahead and clean up. So the clone stamp tool and the healing brush both will help you cover up areas that may be problematic or distracting. So the healing brush. We actually have two different options for healing brush. One is just the regular healing brush, and the other one is the spot healing brush. The regular healing brush just allows you to click on the area and it does its magic. The spot healing brush allows you to choose the area you want to use as the source. And so sometimes you want to mix and match. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the regular healing brush for right this moment. Again, zooming in, and you want the brush to be about the size of what you're trying to cover. It doesn't have to be too big or too small. You don't want to get it too big because it'll kind of overlap in these areas. Remember, the left bracket makes the brush smaller, right bracket makes the brush bigger. So all I want to do is just click, and all you have to do, oh, I'm on the wrong brush. Sorry, spot healing brush is what I said. We'll come back to the other healing brush, but spot healing brush, I'm going to just click once and it's magic. It is amazing. Oh, I almost messed up here. One thing, I'm going to undo that stuff. And if you ever need to undo something, you just go back to the history and go backwards. And so here, I just undid those last spot healing steps. Keeping in line with our non-destructive editing capabilities and approach, I want to make a new layer. So I'm going to click on this new layer, and I'm just going to double click the name here and say retouch. Now I want to use my spot healing brush, but one thing I have to change or check for anyway is sample all layers. It worked the first time because I was on the layer 0, which was our original image. We don't want to work directly on the original. We always want to work on a layer or something we can delete later if we're not going to use it, or it became not something that was what we wanted. So sample all layers. If you don't see a change, that's most likely the reason. Make sure this is checked. Again, I'm going to click here. It still goes away. I'm going to show you the net result here in a minute. So again, with the space bar, get the hand tool. So all I'm doing is clicking on these various areas so that I can clean them up. Now, there are other techniques for cleaning up skin and making it really, really polished looking. We'll get to those as we move further through the semester. So really, this is kind of it works most of the time seamlessly, but you have to know when it's not working. You can't just force it to work. And so when I'm doing this, I'm double checking and making sure that it seems to be working. Okay, so here, let's just try this. Let's see how this works. We're going to click and drag. Wow, look at that. This might be a problem. Usually when you're up against an edge like that, it does become a problem. Not always. Look at that. I am amazed at some of the stuff that Photoshop can do. I've been using it forever, and it still amazes me. So you can see all I'm doing is painting. Make sure you get it all. I'm not going to go through for this process and get every little thing. Let me zoom back out, and let's zoom back down here a little bit. So if it's a blemish, that's one thing. If it's just, you know, a distinguishing mark like a mole or something like that, we can keep those depending on, you know, what you're trying to achieve with your image, and or if the client said, hey, can you get rid of that mole? Okay, and I think that looks pretty good for right now. Maybe a little bit of that. I'm going to get a bigger brush. And so here, I'm going to zoom back out and actually zoom in a little bit so we can actually see more. Let me fix that one up a little bit. Cool. I think that looks pretty good. Oh, don't forget the ears. Again, it's a non-issue, but you know, some of these things might be a little on the distracting side. All right, that's pretty good, you know. Okay, so let me zoom out, Command minus. I want to show you what we just did. On this layer here, retouch layer, if I turn this off, notice all these little spots. Those are the areas that we're retouching the layer below it. So if I turn this layer back on, it looks pretty good. If I turn this layer off, the retouch layer, notice these spots come back. So it's a really handy way to cover things up and have full control over it if you've, again, gone too far or you need to back it off a little bit. That's the way to do it. Okay, so that was the healing brush. The spot healing brush, I'm sorry, that was a spot healing brush. I keep going backwards. The healing brush works the same way. The only difference is, let me switch images here. The only difference is you're going to pick an area you want it to cover up. So here, if I click this, you may get this warning. Option click on the Mac or on the PC, it would be Alt click to define a source point to use to repair the image. Click OK. So what that means is I'm going to hold down my Option key, and you'll get this crosshair temporarily, and I click. When I let go of the Option key or the Alt key, then it's going to go use that area that I just defined. Notice the white plus sign and the little round circle. The circle is the brush that I'm painting with, and the crosshair, the plus sign, is the actual area that it's sampling from. Okay, so I'm going to undo that one. And again, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to click on this new layer icon, and again, call this retouch. And here we go. So I'm going to option click on an area that makes sense. I'm definitely not going to pick up here or any of these pearls. I'm going to click nearby, not right next to it, but nearby. Option click, and that, see? I did this on purpose so you guys would learn. So again, with this brush, with the the healing brush, I want to make sure I sample current layer and below. At least current layer and below. We'll get into why you'd want to say all layers later, but this is pretty much current layer and below. So again, ta-da! Here, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to pick an area over here, Option, click, let go, or Alt click on the PC, and paint. You can make the brush bigger or smaller. So you're always wanting to Option or Alt click on a new area. Here, here. So sometimes, you know, depending on what you're trying to do, you need to pick the area and not let the software dictate where you're actually going to click or what it's going to use to cover it up. On the previous image with the spot healing brush, I mean, it was a no-brainer. When you have to start thinking about it or it's not working, you might need to switch over to the healing brush. And that's this one right now. The healing brush, where you have to Option or Alt click on an area. So anytime you see the cross here, it means I'm Option or Alt clicking and going with that. I know you're saying, well, you could have just used the other brush. And you're right, it would have been easier. But the point is that you wouldn't have learned this brush. So I'm just showing you this brush. Okay, so sometimes you just can't step away. All right, that's fine. So again, with it being on its own layer, turn that off and you can see the spots come back. So we have our two healing brushes. We have our spot healing brush and we have our regular healing brush. The only difference is spot healing does it automatically, whatever you click on, and the healing brush you have to Option or Alt click on a specific area to define the source. With that, the clone stamp tool works very similarly to the healing brush, except it will give you an exact copy of what you're using as the source to cover the repair or to repair the image elsewhere. So in other words, it's not necessarily going to blend things together the same. It's going to give you an exact copy. So let's do this in reverse. This might illustrate things a little bit better. If I wanted to make more moles on this image here, I'm going to Option or Alt click on the source. I'm going to use this as a source right now, so don't get confused. And it's going to make another copy. If I zoom in here, it's going to be an exact copy, not a blended copy, an exact copy. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z or Control Z. And so I do want to pick, you know, an area that really makes sense. I can't be a little loose on it like I did with the healing brush. So again, Option or Alt click, and then you're going to cover it up. The cool thing is you can actually start to see a preview. So if I roll over here, over the top of this, so you can actually see it better. You know, it's actually a preview, making the brush bigger so you can see it. It's a preview of what I'm going to be using as my cover-up. So that makes more sense. If I was over here, it's not going to make that much more sense because it's darker and a little bit more red than the original area that's trying to cover up. So again, make my brush smaller, left bracket. I'm going to pick an area that, like I said, makes sense. So this looks like it's probably the good fit. Option or Alt click, come over here and cover it up. So it doesn't quite do the exact same ideal job. Maybe I want a smaller brush. So again, hit it like that. And same with this. You want to keep defining those sources. So there is a use for both. And my go-to, my approach typically is I'm going to use the spot healing brush or the healing brush, one or the other, initially. And if I have an area that seems to be problematic and I need an exact copy of something, or when I blend it together it looks just odd, I will go ahead and use the clone stamp tool to give myself an exact replica or exact duplicate. Option click on this and so on. Option click. So you probably hear on the audio a lot of clicking going on. That's the nature of Photoshop. It's a clicking program. Oop. See, right there. Those last two. If that happens to you, go back to your history, Command Z. See, it's keeping track of all my, not all of them, but the last, quite the last few of my clone stamps. Again, picking an area. I'm going to pick one over here. Looks a little bit better. And this one probably from right around here. And you don't have to just click. You can click and drag, so you can actually kind of paint on it. That looks a little bit better. So again, turn that layer off, turn it on, and everything is cleaned up. Just to also illustrate what that clone stamp is doing, like I said, it's giving you an exact copy. Let's, for whatever reason, maybe you want to make another, pendant. So if I make a new layer here, we'll call it pendant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it as my source. So I'm going to Option click here. going to go over here, make my brush bigger so we can see it. And I'm just going to paint. Now it's taking everything. Notice the crosshair on the left-hand side. That's what it's using as the source. So, you know, if I turn all these other layers off, you can see, looks a little disconcerting, but you can see that I have a new pendant and it's an exact copy of the original. So you could move it, take the move tool, I'm just playing around here, and move it around, you know, get it somewhere that makes sense or not at all. So, you know, if you have too much on a layer, and again, this is the beauty of having layers, you're not actually erasing information from the original image. I'm going to use the eraser tool, and I'm using the eraser tool now. I'm going to show you other techniques with layer masks that you won't be using the eraser tool ever again, because you're going to mask out the areas, which means you're going to hide it. We'll get into that. So for now, I'm just going to erase it. Erasing is a destructive process because I can't bring that information back without going back in and selecting the original. So yeah, it doesn't look great, but it, you know, it's doable. So the key components of this video are using the healing brushes and or the clone stamp tool. And again, the spot healing brush, you just click on wherever you want to cover up and it does its job. Here, if I click on this, I'm going to get rid of this pendant here and go back to this one. If I clicked on it, watch, it probably covers it up like seamlessly. It's taking, whoa, it did. So again, Photoshop still amazes the heck out of me. And this is one reason why it amazes me. So it's gotten so much better and so much more sophisticated over the years. Again, with the spot healing brush, you just click. With the healing brush, you have to Option or Alt click the source area to use as a cover-up. And then for the clone stamp tool, it works the same way. You Option click from one part of the image to another. And then you just paint on that area, but it gives you an exact copy. That's it for this video. See you in a bit.